Hey guys, welcome. My name is Adam Erlichman. I am executive director, consultant, author with Build Groups. And I've got with me my friend Phil Todd from the Southern Baptist Convention of Texas. And I'm going to let him introduce himself here in just a minute, but excited to talk with you guys on the area of discipleship today. Specifically in the local church. Phil works all around the state of Texas with churches on the topic of discipleship and those processes and pathways and practices and what all that looks like. And so I'm really excited to hear from Phil. I've known Phil for a few years now, and it was funny how we met. I think you went into the appraisal district, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I went in the local tax office to go file my homestead exemption.
Right. And you ran into, of all the people, the customer service people there, my wife was working there,
Yeah.
and yeah, go ahead.
No, we struck up a conversation and, what do you do? So I was saying, yeah, I do this. It's new with the SBTC and over the area of discipleship. And she's like, oh, my husband's a discipleship pastor. And I was like, well, I need to get to know him then. So that's where it started. Yeah.
Yeah. So all good things in my life usually come through my wife. And so this is just another one of those, right? So I feel very blessed to know you and to call you a friend and a brother and a partner in making disciples. And so I serve on the discipleship team now that you've assembled. Very, very good, awesome group of guys, and I feel privileged to be a part of that as well. So let's do this. Phil, why don't you introduce yourself?
All right. Yeah. So as Adam said, my name is Phil Todd, and I was called to ministry. Grew up in a coach's family. My dad was a basketball coach. Went to college having no idea what I wanted to do with my life. Kind of floundered around my freshman year, but in that, God called me to ministry, which was the furthest thing from any thoughts I had about what my life might look like. I didn't know what it looked like, but it certainly didn't look like church ministry or serving full-time ministry. But surrender to that calling. And since that time, I've been over 30 years on just local church staff, all the way from a youth ministry intern to a student pastor to groups pastor, and then finished my time in the local church staff at least the first part of my career ministry, if you look at it as a career, and my calling in ministry as an executive pastor. And so that required lots of hats, from missions to men's ministry, groups ministry, just filling in when staff members might come and go, and all the administrative things that go with that. So that's kind of my history ministry. But along the way in college, I met my bride of over 31 years. And so as you said, every good thing in your life comes through her. Well, brother, I understand that, man. So praise the Lord for his grace to allow me to marry way out of my league. And man, we've just have love. I've really had a true partner in ministry. She's always involved, every church that we've been a part of, and just a privilege to serve side by side, in ministry. We have two boys. They're both grown. They both got married in the summer of 21, 8 weeks apart in two different locations. So that's a fun summer, and then, so anyway, yeah, that's kind of my family, a little bit of our background, and then the last, almost 2 years I've been serving now with the Southern Baptist of Texas Convention.
And what's your role, your official title with?
By title, it is Spiritual Formation Ministries Team Leader, and my specific area of focus is adult discipleship, small groups, Sunday school.
Nice. Okay. Well, good. So let's dive right into it, Phil. You were called to this role 2 years ago. Your experience in youth, men's, small groups, Sunday school ministry, over 30 years, right, of doing that, and executive pastor. And so, now you are in not one church, but you're in many churches, and you're getting to hear all the different things from different churches about this or that. And so I want to ask you in a minute about, some of the challenges that you're seeing churches are facing today in discipleship culture, or just discipleship versus culture within the church, people outside the church trying to get them in the church, all of those things. But before I do, I'd love to just hear your heart about, what you love about discipleship, what you enjoy, for you to go, yes, Lord, I will, gladly accept that call. I mean, the spirit I've kind of gotten from you is not that you came to this role begrudgingly. You've really enjoyed it. You were really excited for it. and so what about this do you like? What do you enjoy about it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, great question. And I came into this role. So coming on staff at the convention was not even a thought process. I knew that the Lord was preparing to move me from the role I'd been at, the church I'd been at for almost 19 years. So we had a long stay in ministry there, and there was a lot of blessings, a lot of great things, but just through God speaking very directly to me. I knew I was going to be leaving, but I didn't know where. I just assumed another church somewhere else. But yeah, God had a different plan, and wound up coming to the SBTC. But really looking back, what I love about what I get to do is really tied to my personal journey, because I went back to seminary in the year of COVID, before I ever knew COVID was going to happen, to finish my degree. And that wound up being a Master of Arts in Discipleship. And so in that year of finishing up that degree, God used seminary classes to really kind of pull back the curtain on my heart, to see that I was active in ministry, doing a lot of good things, but at a personal level, I was not intentionally investing my life into individuals. I was leading groups. I was teaching Bible studies. I would preach from time to time. I was doing all the stuff that we do in ministry, right? But God just let me see that I had lost vision personally for disciple making. And so God really brought me back to just my personal calling to make disciples, totally separate from any calling to be in ministry, just to be an obedient disciple of Him who was being intentional to make disciples within the circles of my life. And so, made a course correction, and began to disciple some guys at the church I was at, and they were in my small group. Of one of those guys is now leading the small group that I vacated when we left. So that was a cool thing. And now discipling a couple of guys, one guy that's contract labor here in our office, and another college kid that I met on a trip to Israel. We're doing some discipleship stuff there. So to talk personally, I love that journey of walking alongside someone else, of just arm in arm, iron sharpening iron, growing in Christ together, spurring one another on, and meant to be used of the Lord, and to be able to look back and just be humbled by the fact that God used me in somebody else's walk with the Lord. Is so humbling, but that's why I get up in the morning. That excites me. So translate that to my job, to encourage churches and challenge churches to be about building up disciples who make disciples, not just teaching information, not just transferring Bible knowledge, but that we are raising up people in our churches who love Jesus, walk intimately with Him, and are helping others learn how to do that themselves. So in a real big bucket, that's what I love about my job. The state convention, there's all kinds of moving parts and all types of things that we do. But boil it down, when I can just be an encouragement to a church to be about truly making disciples, that's what I love.
Man, that's right on. Yeah, that went even beyond what I was even asking in a great way. It
Yeah,
went,
sorry about that.
no, no, you're good. Because I just love how you personalize that and said even just for your own personal obedience outside of your role of ministry, that you felt this conviction to have this reinvigoration of personally investing into people, right? To see them be discipled and to grow and to become all they were meant to in Christ. And for me, it's like it's sort of the same way. I'm wired and I'm gifted in such a way that I love to see ministries grow and numerically, and more people join groups and more new leaders, and pipelines and I love all those things. But at the end of the day, like the thing that really turns me and lights me up, right, is the one story of the one person, like you're talking about, just meeting with that one person and seeing that progress over maybe a long period of time, or maybe it's just that I got to hear it from a group of someone who took that next step, touched their life, made a change that no one ever thought they would. Like those are the things that I just, oh, so yeah, when you're saying that, I'm like resonating very much with you, Phil.
Yeah, good, man. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's go into the next part, right? That I got a preview to just before that question. Landscape of discipleship. There's a lot of things that are going on in American culture and Texan culture, in DFW area, rural, urban, suburban. You cover a lot of different territory and space. And so you're going to see a whole bunch of just different scenarios and contexts and challenges. And so for you, when you are meeting with churches, what are some of the prevalent challenges that you see today in discipleship for local churches?
Yeah. Um, yeah, like you said, so the convention is a very diverse group of churches. Although we're all in Texas, there's a lot of different cultures and contexts. And one of the challenges that I see is because I think about 80% of our churches are what you might classify as a small church, like 100 in attendance or less. And so there's unique challenges there when it just comes to limited leadership, and a lot of times the whole church is looking to the pastor, and many of those pastors are bivocational guys. So, but
What average size would you think those small churches? Are you talking 50, 80, 100, 150?
I think, yeah, between 60 to 70 might be a good average number of those small churches,
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of times those pastors, they're working 2 and 3 jobs, including pastoring the church in order to pay the bills and do all the things for the church they need to do. So there's unique challenges to that. But if you want to say generally speaking across the board, the biggest thing that I see in churches is like, if we're going to take our model of ministry and disciple making and just lay that up against the model that Jesus presents through the Gospels. And I believe that model is, you see in the early year and a half, 18 months, ish of his ministry, there's more focus on the crowds. But as Jesus approaches the cross, we see more intentionality with the 12. And then there's even a little more intentionality with a 3. And so if we take, those are some, real broad generalizations, but if we look at our ministry, and, usually churches are doing pretty good when it comes to that large group crowd gathering, and we're discipling and teaching there. And then they're doing pretty good at having groups, the 12. So we have Sunday school, small groups. But where I see the challenge is that movement to that next level of greater intimacy, those smaller micro groups, of 2, 3, 4 max, of truly walking in intimacy and accountability with one another. And so generally speaking, that's kind of what I'm running into, is that, churches are struggle with that, or they're not even looking at that as a possible avenue for growing their people.
Yes. And so if 80% of the churches in the convention, which there's about like 2,000 some churches in the
Yeah,
SBTC.
about 2,700, little over 2,700 churches in the convention.
Yeah. So 2,700, 80% of that, I mean, you're looking at 2,000 at the least, right? So a little over 2,000 of those churches are running 60 to 70 people. And so do you find that, the pastors of those churches, do they, with working those jobs and trying to make ends meet and pay the bills, preach, prepare a sermon, preach a sermon, make sure all the administrative stuff's taken care of at their church after the home, right? All those things, it's moving and going. Do you find that they get maybe exhausted before they even get the chance to kind of build out or be intentional about that discipleship process, getting in time with those people to invest into them, those 3, the 4, like Jesus did? Are they just beat? Is that kind of what it is?
Oh yeah, sure. That's part of it for sure. Just limited time, and then when they do have some time, the exhaustion level that they experience, it's kind of this snowball that gets to rolling on them, and then sometimes it's just all they can do to be prepared to preach on Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I can only imagine. We were just at the annual SBTC conference earlier this week, and we got to hear Dr. Ed Johnson speak, and bivocational church planter, working a full-time job. And, he just powerfully shared like his experience and his story and the trial and the difficult people asking him, man, how do you do it? A full-time job and plant and get this church up and running. And he was just in tears, sharing his heart.
Yeah.
And those are the people, right, that are the front lines of doing that. And so if that's a challenge, right, that's a challenge that you're seeing in these churches that are running 60 to 70, 80% of churches in the convention. What are some solutions you think that could help with their discipleship intentionality process, or just in general to go, hey, let's just get something going so we can start making disciples? There's some ideas that come to my mind immediately, right? I'm going, hey man, we can help do this. We can help do this because I'm a productivity guy. I'm a hey, how can we squeeze every drop out of this tourniquet for the sake of your personal spiritual health and your family's priority, all those things, right? And so I'm thinking, how do we make more out of the little that is left there, or how do you integrate and take something you're already doing and then build off it to be more intentional to make disciples, right? So what are some solutions that come to mind for you as you've encountered these churches and maybe even offered some of these ideas?
Yeah, well, so first off, I would start with just some principles thing, an encouragement to, number one, prioritize disciple making, which would mean saying no to some things, and to encourage our pastors that are out there that, it really is okay to say no to some stuff that the church wants to do, especially some of the things the churches get involved in, they're just kind of off mission, and so making sure that the things you are saying yes to are on mission. Prioritize disciple making over maybe some programs that are going on that might be chewing up a lot of time and energy. And I realize, there's tradition and there's, all those things that we have to deal with in the church. But, having those conversations, working with your leadership, working with your deacons to get to that point to say no to some things so that disciple making can be a priority for any leadership position of the church, because it is not the pastor who's called to make disciples. It is every single follower of Christ. Yes. Now, to help his church catch that vision, a lot of times that falls to the pastor. But to me, I would encourage any leadership person in the church to start where you are, to start being intentional. make disciple making a priority, carve out some time and ask the Lord, who are 2 or 3 people who are close to me, but maybe far from God, or some leaders in our church that I can equip to walk this road with for a season, to equip them to turn around and do this. And there's lots of great resources out there, lots of curriculums and things like that. Even journaling methods. We're developing one here at the convention, but whatever avenue you use, but that you're consistent, that you're pouring your life into another believer and walking that road, and just to begin. That's what I had to do. I was doing all the stuff in the church, and I just had to step back and say, okay, how can I do this and still be faithful to the responsibilities I've got to do at church? And it meant meeting with a couple of guys. They each had families as well, but we found an evening where we could grab dinner together at a restaurant and spend an hour and a half talking about how Jesus is challenging us, changing us, teaching us, as we went through a study together. And we just found a way to make it work,
Yeah. It's one thing to like live out your own calling, right? And to be faithful to your ministry, which is good and it's right. But then it's a whole nother thing for, the pastor to go, I need to help other people discover their calling, develop them, and deploy them to go live out their own calling, right? And so
Right.
Oftentimes there's this mental shift that I see that pastors and churches, I think, really need to make, of instead of thinking about like plugging holes in a ship, like, hey, we just got to get all this done so that, for survival. I think, and I try to help churches and pastors and leaders change their mindset to the other side of it, of not defense, but offense. Hey, if you invest into people and you help them discover their calling, right? And you invest just the way that exact way you're saying, and journaling and training. And, I actually have the journal that you guys are writing. I have it in my inbox. I'm excited to read through that and give you some feedback on it. Feel very privileged. I get to get a little bit of early access to see that. So I'll be getting back to you on that quick. I'm looking forward to it. But being able to help them fulfill their ministry, not just your own ministry. And then the Lord just multiplies that, right? Just, tenfold, and that's not just survival, but then it's now it's thriving, and it's exciting, and it's thrilling. And, and you're not going, okay, I'm working 2 jobs on the side and pastor and trying to do all. You get to see the fruit of that labor, and many hands, right, make light work. And so that's the cool part about that. So
your resource on the group leader, training that you've developed, that can be used as part of that journey, of pouring into leaders to help them discover where God's leading them to lead in ministry. And developing leaders is initially, I guess it's an investment, it's a challenge, and on the front end, if you haven't been doing it, you got to do some plowing up some hard soil, and it takes time. But what you said though, on the back end, if you will do that hard work of pouring into leaders and investing in a few, and then they are equipped to go and do the same, then you begin to see that multiplication effect start taking place. That's where we can start seeing ministry be fun, because we start seeing God's people walk out in their calling. And, whether they're serving in a ministry of the church or not, man, if you saw a church member who was meeting with a neighbor over coffee and walking through the book of John together, man, there's some excitement in that, because somebody's just walking in obedience to what God's called us to do.
Yes. This is why I think we get along so well, Phil, because, with build groups, like our vision, our goal is to help, thousands upon thousands of people, right? We're our goal, you can go to our about page on the website, buildgroups.net, right? We're trying to help discover, develop, deploy 15,000 leaders and volunteers to impact 300,000 church members. Like that's kind of our goal over the next 5 to 10 year period. And, we're like, hey, we'll decide, how close we get to that before we put a timeline on ourselves. Right? But, that's the heart is we want to see it. And the reason why is because I'll ask a pastor this question, especially at a smaller church that I'm working with. How would it change your life, pastor of 60 to 70 people in your church, solo pastor, bivocational pastor? How would it change your ministry if you added 3 new leaders who could help shepherd people in your church?
Yeah.
And to them, I mean, that's like groundbreaking, right? That's like, oh my goodness, that would be incredible to have 3 partners to shepherd and disciple and maybe even teach in some cases. And so, the group leader training, that's why I put that resource together, is it was intended to help. It was intended to help mobilize and equip potential new group leaders, people who are sitting on the bench and really could get onto the field or are unsure on the bench looking, I don't know if I could do that in that, that 5-session workbook training that we released just last week, that it helps move them into that. And so one of the key things that I love, and I was very intentional when I wrote that resource, the 4th chapter, the 4th session on serve, is we train group leaders how to mobilize church members, how to begin serving, that they're not just learning and staying in their group, but they're being sent to use their giftings and to fulfill their calling too, right? As you'd want a pastor to help potential group leaders, or maybe that's a deacon or it's an elder, to start investing and then fulfill their calling. They're going to go and help church members, group members to do the same, right? So that's just why we get along, Phil.
Yeah. Well, and what I love about that too is there's a tool there. You've given a tool, there's a process, but leader investment and discipleship of leaders begins to help change a culture. So then, because we've become really good at groups, whether it's Sunday school or small groups off campus or whatever, we've gotten really good at those becoming parking spaces instead of launch pads. And so the leader training you're talking about, that we're talking about, investing in leaders, helps change that culture and can help change the mindset of a group to become a launch pad. And I mean, man, I have the conviction that if somebody, that people in my group, after about 18 months to 2 years, there's a lot of them that don't need to be there anymore because they need to be leading their own group. They need to be serving in some ministry, and maybe it's happening at the same time as our group, but they've kind of launched out and discovered where God's calling them, and they're serving and they're walking in that obedience instead of just parking in my group.
Yes. No, my father-in-law uses this illustration, and I've borrowed it from him because I love it. I think it's a perfect illustration, especially in groups, is, hey, groups are not a cruise ship of consumerism. It is an aircraft carrier where we come in to fill up and be sent back out on mission. Right.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, they're not parking spots. They're launch pads. And that is, that's such a great picture.
Yeah, that is great illustration.
Yes. Well, that is all the time that we have for today to wrap some things up here. Phil, thanks for joining me and just coming on to share about some of this, and I hope that those of you who are listening, that this just added some value to you and to your ministry, maybe how you think about some things, maybe some mental shifts that you hadn't considered before. And if you are a pastor at a smaller church of 60 to 70 people, there are some great resources out there. I'm really looking forward to Phil's journal that's coming out, my group leader training book. You can get that on Amazon, or you can go to my website, www.buildgroups.net, and you'll be able to find that. One of the pages, it's all over. It's 6-year labor of love. It's on every single web page I might have, I think, because I just love it. But plenty of other good resources out there, curriculums, training. The important part is just to start doing something. There's a guy named Brian Howard, very, very intentional discipleship process that I've learned a good bit from at a distance. And what he said, I've never forgotten. He's like, when it comes to training, when it comes to discipling, you don't have to have it perfect. You don't have to have it all figured out. Just do something. Get going. Just do something. And so as we close out and we'll say goodbye, listeners, just do something.
Do something. That's right. Hey, Adam, thanks, brother. It's been a privilege to be on here with you.
For sure. You as well, Phil. Thank you.